FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
And we had so much fun on the last episode of FAIRtax Power Radio debunking the flaws of the fair tax as presented in a particular presentation that's been going around that we've seen at least twice. And we want you all to know the truth about what's going on here. But first, let's encourage you to talk with us. The FAIRtax Guys, gmail.com is the email address. And like us on Facebook. Go to the FAIRtax Guys page. Leave us a comment or a question. Be glad to hear from you.
And please tell your friends and neighbors about FAIRtax Power Radio. If we're going to get this done, and I believe we're going to get it done next year in 2017, I really do. But it's going to require millions and millions of people being knowledgeable about the fair tax, because that's what we're talking about in the previous episode and this one, how people are going to demagogue the issue. People like lobbyists who don't want to, lose their cushy little job where they don't really work for a living. I probably shouldn't be that generalizing, but anyways.
We do need to make note of the fact that the man who's given this flaws of the fair tax presentation is a retired lobbyist, and he's doing it in cahoots with an insurance agent who wants to sell you something.
Yeah. So, anyways, very quickly, in the previous issue, we handled the idea that FICA is not a tax; it's a payment on an insurance policy. Wrong. We should have one of those buzzers, the Buell of the buzzer or something.
Well, I don't have one right in front of me here.
FICA is a tax. It's been challenged in the Supreme Court. It is a tax, and Congress has constitutional authority to levy a tax. He questioned the true support in Congress, and we reminded people that the people who are co-sponsors of the fair tax in Congress, by and large, are true believers, because Rob Woodall only goes after and secures support from people who really mean it. The fair tax, he said, well, it's not really 23%, it's 30%. It's the same amount of money. You buy something for $100 and there's $23 worth of fair tax in there. You can call it 23% inclusive or 30% exclusive, but the amount of money stays the same. The price of the product doesn't change. It's an argument for the sake of arguing. And then the last one there, the embedded costs. Yeah, he said corporations, when their cost of doing business goes down, they're just going to keep the money. They're not going to lower the prices.
Not for long. They want in the competitive free marketplace.
Yeah. So
that's our review. Let's press forward here with several other items that are on this man's presentation. And this is one that we intend to have some fun with. It says this is one time where he's actually kind of halfway right, but not really. He was made a big point that the bill, as it is written, it would be possible for Congress to maintain the current income tax system plus the fair tax until the repeal of the 16th Amendment. Again, the 16th Amendment was the one in 1913 that authorized the federal government to collect an income tax. Prior to that, it was unconstitutional. But they're saying, we can have the fair tax and the income tax. Theoretically possible, but not very likely.
Now, for one thing, if you look, and he claims that he got all this information just by reading the fair tax bill. Well, if he really did read it, then he would find out that all of the authority to the IRS is rescinded. Every section of the current tax code is hereby rescinded. When people vote and the president signs the fair tax bill, boom, out the window goes the income tax. All authority for the income tax is gone. The IRS will have nothing. The only thing the IRS will be allowed to do is finish up what they're currently working on. Let's say that the fair tax began on January 1st of 2018. All right? The IRS is going to be around for about 3 more years. They get to finish up what they're doing up to December 31st of 2017, and they cannot go forward with anything. They will have no authority to do anything after January 1st of 2018, using that example. So that's written into the bill. I'm not sure how we missed that one, Bob.
Yeah, we've always liked to harp on the fact that the FAIRtax bill is only 133 pages. It does not take 133 pages to describe the workings of the FAIRtax. A large chunk of that 133 pages are references to the current federal code that will be repealed by the FAIRtax.
Absolutely
So
right.
on the day that the FAIRtax goes into effect, then yes, all of the statutory authority to collect and enforce and everything to do with the income tax goes away. That doesn't say that the Congress can't put it back. Theoretically, it can. Probably the people are not going to let them get away with it. But of course, then the FAIRtax is contingent. Again, this is written in the bill. It is contingent on the repeal of the 16th Amendment.
Yeah.
And the constitutional amendment process allows for up to 7 years to get a constitutional amendment, passed through Congress and then ratified by an appropriate number of states. And the FAIRtax bill says if that amendment, the 16th Amendment, is not repealed within this 7 years that the Constitution allows, then the FAIRtax sunsets, we get the income tax back. So for those 7 years, it is possible that the Congress could reauthorize the income tax on top of the FAIRtax. But when you think about it, what's to stop them from putting a sales tax on top of the income tax now? They've had that possibility existing for over 100 years and it hadn't happened.
And they're talking about it, too. They're talking about there are people in Congress who would love to have both a consumption tax and an income tax, which we think is a horrible idea. So, yeah, they're talking about it now. It's very unlikely after passing the FAIRtax, which, like I said, rescinds all the language for the IRS. It's all gone. The IRS code is gone. To turn around and pass another income tax. For one thing, we're going to have a lot of awareness on the part of the American people. There's going to be a lot of ads on TV and so forth about the FAIRtax. People are going to become much more knowledgeable, and people are going to become much more aware. And, there's groups out there that watch over Congress like a hawk. And when they do something wrong, we notify people immediately about it. So does he really think that Congress is going to, after passing the FAIRtax, is going to turn around and reauthorize the income tax? No, I don't think so.
I don't think people are going to allow them to do that. And
No.
of course, the key point here is that no act of Congress, no legislation can affect a constitutional amendment. So the fact that this has to be a separate process to repeal the 16th Amendment is just the way the Founding Fathers wrote the rules.
And think about the presidency, too. You pass the FAIRtax. It's passed by the House and the Senate. It goes to the president, whoever it is. The president signs it. And then you're going to ask the president, the same president who signed the FAIRtax bill that got rid of the income tax, to turn around and sign another income tax? I don't think so.
Well, I don't think it'll take but a couple of months under the FAIRtax when people are bringing home their full gross amount with no federal withholding and no federal payroll taxes, when people will be getting the prebate, which again is just a tax refund of taxes that you paid that you don't owe. People have all this extra money in their pockets that they don't have now, and they're going to let a congressman get away with reimposing the income tax? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think it'll take anywhere near the 7 years to get the 16th Amendment repealed either.
Absolutely not.
Once people begin to see begin living under it and see what the FAIRtax actually does for them.
Now, and if you want a taste of that, go back to, I believe it's episode 18, where Thomas Jefferson paid a second visit to George Morgan after the FAIRtax was passed, and all the good things that were happening. That'll give you an idea of what's going to happen under the FAIRtax.
So yeah, it's possible to have an income tax and the FAIRtax for 7 years. Yeah, technically true. In practical reality, ain't gonna happen.
No,
Now,
it's not.
I know I'm fixing to push your red button over here because
Okay.
the gentleman that's doing this flaws of the FAIRtax presentation is a big advocate of the VAT, the VAT tax, value added tax. That's what they have in Europe, and you just love that idea, don't you, Ron?
Oh, yeah. He said he personally favored a VAT tax as long as it remained small.
Oops, where have we heard that?
Where's
we
the
seen that
siren?
before?
As long as it remains small.
Yeah, the income tax that was originally written was a really small one that hit a small group of people, and within 30 years, less than a generation, it had gone from like 7% to 70%.
Well, take
Do
a
you
look.
really think it's going to stay small?
Yeah, take a look at Europe. All right, I'll never forget the lady when my wife and I were brand new to the FAIRtax, and we were helping our friends Nick and Barb at an event. And I was passing out information. I really didn't know a lot about it. And a lady came up. She said, "I'm from the UK. Save it because it doesn't affect me." And then she wagged her finger at me. "Don't let them do what they did to us. They said if we passed the VAT tax, we could lower the income tax. They didn't do that. We didn't lower the income tax, and the VAT tax has grown wildly." She said, "Don't let them do that." The VAT tax, a value-added tax, which I call a stealth tax, is a production tax. It is an insidious tax that goes in at every step of production. If you make a car, you start out by digging iron ore out of the ground, and you refine it to iron. You've increased the value of it, so you add a tax. You take that iron and make steel out of it by adding carbon. You increase the value of it, so you added a tax. You take that steel and shape it into particular parts. You just increase the value of it, so you add a tax. Every step along the way of producing something, a little tax is added. The record keeping is amazing.
And by the time it hits the consumer,
and the propensity for Congress to get in there and mess it up because it's so invisible. It's not something you see every day. The propensity for hanky-panky on the part of Congress messing around with it is tremendous. VAT tax is a terrible idea.
yeah, and people sometimes actually, I don't see how they do this. They confuse the fair tax with a VAT tax. They think it's the same.
Yeah. Sometimes they confuse a flat tax with a fair tax, all right? Fair tax is a consumption tax. Bob and I live in Florida. We have a consumption tax, a sales tax. We don't have an income tax. And our economy in Florida is not doing too badly. The same with Texas. They have a sales tax and no income tax. So don't confuse the fair tax with the flat tax or the VAT tax. They're very different.
Okay, let's move on a little bit to the gaping black hole in this flaws of the fair tax presentation, and that is we have talked time and time again about the prebate in the fair tax, where you are refunded back tax that's collected from you on your spending up to the poverty level that you don't owe. And somehow Mr. Flaws of the fair tax never did get around to addressing that particular part of the fair tax.
Now, the first time we saw this guy, my wife asked him, "What about the prebate?" "I'll get to that later." Well, he didn't, because he did his presentation, and I was trying to be professionally cooperative and let him finish his presentation and then ask questions, which we did, and he kind of left there with his tail tucked between his legs. But anyways, he never got to the prebate. Okay, second time he shows up here where Bob and I live, here in Ocala. Again, what about the prebate? I'll get to that later. He completely dodged the idea of the prebate, because this is something that makes the fair tax fair. The fair tax is only possible with the prebate. It's an extremely important concept, and he just wrote it off. He never addressed it. Maybe he didn't understand it. I don't know what his problem was, but he completely ignored the idea of the prebate.
And again, a prebate is a rebate given to you in advance. Every legal household will get one. You register for it with Social Security Administration. All they need to know is your household size and who's in it, so the same person's not being claimed multiple times in different households. But the prebate is a refund. It's pure and simple, a tax refund, because you're going to pay the fair tax on every item you buy or every service you buy. But you don't owe it until your spending exceeds the poverty level. So rather than trying to figure out how much everybody has spent, totally impossible to begin with in fraud, you could not have a more fraud-prone system than that. They just collect it from everybody and give back to you, rebate the tax that you paid that you don't owe. That's what the prebate is, and you get it every month. It's exactly the same way as the tax refund you're getting from the IRS. If you overpay your income taxes, you get the difference back. If you overpay the fair tax, which you will, you get the difference back every month. Pure and simple.
Technically, the name is the Family Consumption Allowance, but the nickname was given, instead of a rebate, they started calling it the prebate because, like Bob said, it comes at the beginning of the month. And the amount of prebate is based on what? The size of your family. That's it. All you do is you submit a very simple form. This is our family. This is the people in the family. These are our legal Social Security numbers. And boom, you get a prebate of X amount of dollars. And I think right now for the current year, The prebate for a family of 4, mom and dad and 2 kids, is I believe $613.
Yeah, it's a tick over $600 a month for a family of 4.
Yeah. And like Bob says, it's a refund. It's a refund because they don't want you paying the fair tax on the basic necessities, but they don't want to set up a program where this item is taxed and that item is not taxed, or you have a card that says I'm poor and I don't pay the taxes on this. All those things are subject to fraud and abuse. So we simply do a prebate for everybody in the country. Every legal resident in the country is eligible for the prebate.
So if you're spending at the poverty level, then the tax you pay at the cash register is completely refunded back to you by the prebate. Your out-of-pocket tax rate is 0.
Yeah.
If you spend less than the poverty level, you make money on the deal.
What other tax plan can anybody show me that makes sure that the people who are living right at the poverty level are rendered tax-free? And I don't have a problem with that. People who are just getting by, who are just being able to support their family, they shouldn't be burdened with excessive taxes.
Yeah. Support your family before you feed the government.
Yeah, exactly. All right. When they get a raise because the economy is going to blossom and they start making more money and they start spending more money, okay, that's good. The fair tax will kick in and they will be supporting the rest of it. But those people just getting by, the prebate is the key to fairness in the fair tax. And to completely ignore it by this guy is really disingenuous.
All right, so we do need to move along. We'll encourage people to go to fairtax.org and learn more about the prebate if you need to, how it works, what it is, how you get it, and things like that. But we do need to move on, and
yeah,
here is a goodie. Excuse me. Again, one of the features of the fair tax is that it is a retail consumption tax. It is levied at the retail level, period, which means that if you are a manufacturer or a wholesaler or something like that, if you're, Jack's Shed Company and you're building sheds to sell at retail, you do not have to pay the fair tax when you buy your plywood and your shingles and your door hinges and all that stuff. Stuff you buy for the operation of your business is not taxed under the fair tax. And this fellow was saying, well, what's going to stop people from just setting themselves up as corporations, taking advantage of that little piece of the fair tax and avoiding it altogether?
So how do you set yourself up as a corporation?
You go to a lawyer.
You do it within your state. It's actually pretty simple to do. There are actually kits that you can buy. But you do it within your state. All right. It's not that the federal government is going to be checking all these people. The states are going to do that. The states are already doing that. All right. So and they have ways of figuring out this guy is trying to set himself up as a corporation, but he's not a corporation. They can look at figures and so forth. They can find out what's going on. And when the state finds out you're committing fraud, well, I don't want to be there because it's not going to be pretty.
I would guess what you would really need to exempt yourself from the fair tax, though, would be an occupational license, not necessarily just articles of incorporation.
Yeah,
you'd have to show that you are in business and that the products and services you are purchasing are used in your business towards making another product.
And if you're in business, you have to submit business taxes, even if you're not required to pay taxes. You still have to submit a business report, a business tax return every year. And the state looks at those, not the federal government. The state is the one that gives you your articles of incorporation, and they're the ones that look at your return, and they can say, hey, wait a minute. We gave this guy a corporation license, and he's not doing anything. He's not running a company. I think we need to go pay him a visit.
Okay, but that's just not going to happen.
No.
Some folks might try it, but setting yourself up as a corporation doesn't necessarily mean that you're setting yourself up as a business that is actually dealing in goods and services.
Yeah.
And you've got to be actually dealing in goods and services before you could be exempt from the fair tax like that. Now, here's another thing that this guy got into. He talked about a lawn maintenance operation. Mm-hmm. That's okay. XYZ lawn maintenance company comes out here, charges you X number of dollars to mow your lawn and do whatever landscaping you does. included in that price that he charges you, Ron, the retail customer, is the fair tax. But then this guy decides he's going to try to make a little extra money, and he collects the fair tax from you, but does not remit it to the state tax recording agency. Now, according to this guy that was doing this presentation, the government is going to come back after you, not after the guy that's not paying in the fair tax.
Yeah. How? How is that going to happen?
How will they even know who you are?
How does the federal government know that this guy mowed my lawn and I paid him and he didn't send the fair tax in? How? It's ludicrous. I mean, we've had 320 million people in this country. They have trouble. The IRS has trouble keeping up with, I think it's 140 million tax returns. And now they're going to go after 320 million consumers. Come on. That's not going to happen. If an individual, a small businessman like that, does not submit what he collected for the fair tax to the state agency, that person is going to get in trouble with the state agency. They are going to, and remember, the states have been doing this for a long time. They know how to look at this stuff. Yeah. They know how to figure out if somebody's, playing fast and loose with the laws.
Yeah. Ron, how many retail customers have been prosecuted and gone after because a vendor was not remitting the state sales tax?
Yeah, well, it seems to me, I haven't seen any of those in the paper or on the internet. Have you?
No, that's another beauty of the fair tax. The enforcement goes from 320 million points down to just the vendors.
Yeah,
the individuals are not involved in this at all. They pay the tax anonymously at the cash register when they buy something. At that point, the consumer's liability is done with, over with, and if the vendor is not remitting the fair tax in, then he's in trouble, not you.
Yeah, that's right. The fair tax is anonymous on the part of the consumer.
And it's really easy to catch those guys, too, because they have books. They know how much their sales are.
It really
if your sales is X number of dollars, then 23% of that should be going in.
Yeah.
And if that's not, then they know something's going on.
It's another ludicrous claim on the part of this Mr. Flaws of the fair tax. It just doesn't make any sense when you stop to think about it. All right. Plus, why would the vendor want to do this? Because the vendor has a family too, and the vendor gets a prebate. So do you really believe that this person is going to not submit the fair tax to the state, but he's still going to get the prebate? That's not going to work.
All right, we got to move along here. Here's another point here that was talking about in this Flaws of the Fair Tax made the unsubstantiated claim that the fair tax would actually favor those in the upper and even the middle and upper income levels by letting them pay a lower tax rate than the middle or lower income earners, and that just don't fly.
No. If you, Dr. Karen Walby, who is our resident research on tax and economic policy, she has submitted a number of white papers, and one of them specifically addresses this. And it is why the fair tax will benefit the lower and middle income people. It's very simple. For one thing, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. The more you spend under the fair tax, the more you spend, the more you pay. It's that simple. If you're a millionaire and you spend a lot of money, you're going to pay a lot of fair tax. If you're living at the poverty level and you're getting that prebate and so forth, and you're just breaking even, you're not going to pay much in the fair tax or zip. So people who spend more will pay more. Plus, there's another aspect of this. The current income tax, they have higher rates for people who make more. It go up to a maximum of 39.6%. But then on top of that, they put all these loopholes and deductions and exemptions and special situations that allow people who can afford to wade through the income tax code take advantage of all those things. So, yeah, it might look progressive, but it's really not, because the very wealthy people can take advantage of these things and end up paying very little in taxes.
Now, Ron, have you noticed that there's a red herring built into this very argument? Because he's talking about people at the upper income levels. The fair tax does not tax income. There is a way that somebody who makes, $18 million a year can pay a lower tax rate than someone who makes, $20,000. And that's to spend less money.
That's right.
Not going to happen.
To use that example that Bob just used, let's say there is somebody who makes $18 million a year and they only spend $1 million. Oh my God. What are we going to do about that? Can we force him to spend? No. Hey, wait a minute. All right. If somebody earns 18 million, first off, that's nobody else's business. And if somebody spends, 1/18 of what they earn, that's also nobody else's business. But what are they going to do with the rest of that money? Are they going to stuff it under their mattress? No, they're going to invest it someplace. They might invest it in a business. They might put it into some kind of an investment instrument, with a bank or a finance company. That money is going to go into the economy and be available for the other people who are trying to start a business. And under the fair tax, there's going to be a lot of people trying to start a business because the economy is going to roar ahead.
Because, the fair tax no longer penalizes savings and investment, which makes the economy tick.
It doesn't penalize hard work. The fair tax does not penalize hard work. The income tax does.
All right, we're getting close to the end here. Last point here, and this flaws the fair tax presentation. The claim is made that foreign visitors will not pay the fair tax because of international treaties we have with other countries. Address that. Yeah,
well, that means that people who come to this country, and we get a lot of, especially Bob and I live in Florida, and we've got all these theme parks, Disney and so forth. And yeah, we do get a lot of, in fact, sometimes when you go to these parks, it's hard to find anybody that speaks English. But anyways, they're having a good time and they're spending their money. So how are they going to get their money back? I mean, it is theoretically possible that they could submit some forms, but they don't do it.
But they just don't do it. The tax is embedded in the price of the things they buy.
Yeah.
And unless they want to save all their receipts and go through a lot of hassle and rigmarole to fill out the form and get it back. Now, there will be some that will do that.
Yeah.
It will be such a insignificant number of people.
Yeah.
They'll pay the fair tax.
Yeah. It's not going to be. He doesn't address the issue of, say, illegal immigrants to this country. Okay, because they're illegal and they don't have a proper Social Security number, they will not get the prebate. But because they go to the store and buy stuff, they will pay the fair tax. He kind of left that one out, didn't he, Bob?
Yeah. So we kind of got to wrap this up. So if you ever get the opportunity to see this flaws of the fair tax presentation, I urge you to go. And I urge you to have some questions in the back of your head, and you can watch this guy tap dance all around the That's entertaining, is it not? But, okay. So I think we've pretty well done it. If you need more information about the fair tax, what it is, how it works, things like that, fairtax.org, excellent resource. If you want to get involved and help make this happen, bigsolution.org is where you need to go.
Yep, at bigsolution.org. And please, folks, we need your help because we really intend on getting this done next year in 2017. It really has to be done. So help us out. Another way to learn about the fair tax, a free webinar. It's the fourth Thursday of every month. You go to fairtax.org/webinar. You have to register for it. They ask you a couple of questions, then they'll email you a link. And it's the fourth Thursday at 8 p.m. So about 5 minutes before 8, you click the link, and boom, you're in the webinar. It's interactive. You can you can type in your questions. They always do a presentation of basic ideas about the fair tax. Then they stop and they answer the questions. Then they go into a special topic. And the next one, at least after this recording session, the next one is going to be my wife and I, because they've asked us to do the webinar since one of the guys has to be away. So let's see. FairtaxLogoStore.org, where you can get your fair tax gear. FairtaxRewards.com, FairtaxRewards.com. Go there and do your online purchasing through that website. Go to FairtaxRewards.com, then search for your item or go to your store and order the item to pick up or to be sent to you. Go to FairtaxRewards.com, and then you get a stipend, and the Americans of Fair Taxation get a stipend, too.
Okay, well, don't get discouraged in well-doing here, because we have the fair tax, we've been at this for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And we are just now, this year, starting to make some significant headway. It takes a while to move the wheels of government.
Yep.
But if you stay at it, I would imagine there were a lot of people who thought the fair tax movement would burn out after a couple of years. We're still here after 20 years going strong. Help us get it through.
Let your friends, relatives, and neighbors know about FAIRtax Power Radio. Tell them where to find it. If you're listening to us on Spreaker, that's free to everybody. People who use iTunes, it's free on iTunes. You can listen to it online. You can download the podcast, whatever suits your needs.
All righty, and that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FAIRtax is coming. Don't stand in the